The lights are low tonight. Not because you turned them down, but because some part of you, the part that is reading this not with your eyes but with something older, something underneath your eyes, already knew you needed the dark to see clearly. Sit with that for a moment. Because what I am about to tell you will not feel like information. It will feel like memory. It will feel like something you always knew but were not allowed to say out loud, not even to yourself, especially not to yourself. You think this is a video about narcissists. It is not. This is a video about you. About the architecture of a wound so old it no longer feels like pain. It feels like personality. It feels like preference. It feels like taste. You tell yourself, I just have a type. I just keep picking the wrong ones. Bad luck, bad timing, bad men, bad women. And every single time, you walk away from the wreckage swearing this was the last time. And some part of you, some quiet, watching part of you, already knows it wasn't. Because you were never actually choosing them. Something in you was choosing you. Something ancient. Something that has been running the same search query since before you had language to name it, scanning every room you walk into, every face that turns toward you, asking one single, silent, desperate question beneath every conversation, every glance, every accidental touch of hands reaching for the same doorknob. Will you finally come back for me? Let that settle into your chest for a second. Feel where it lands. Some of you will feel it just beneath the sternum. Some of you will feel it as a tightening in the throat. An old, familiar closing, like a door you've shut so many times the hinges have worn smooth. Wherever you feel it, stay there. Don't look away yet. The thing we fear examining is always the thing most desperate to be seen. I want to introduce you to someone. She has been with you your whole life. He has been with you your whole life. Depending on how the story unfolded for you, this figure may wear a different face, but the essence never changes. Carl Jung would have called this a fragment of the personal unconscious, a piece of self that broke away not through weakness, but through necessity, in a moment when the world proved itself, even briefly, unsafe. I call this fragment the inner orphan, not because you were literally abandoned. Some of you were. Most of you were not in any way a courtroom would recognize. The inner orphan is not born from the absence of parents. It is born from the absence of attunement. Those countless small moments when a child reached out with an emotional need and met, instead, distraction, irritation, silence, or a love so conditional it had to be earned like currency. A child does not have the cognitive machinery to think, my caregiver is overwhelmed, or my caregiver has their own unhealed wounds. A child can only conclude one thing in the wordless logic of the limbic brain. I am too much, or I am not enough, and therefore I am unsafe here, and I must find safety somewhere else. And so a piece of the psyche splits off. It does not grow up. It cannot grow up. It freezes exactly at the age of the wound, and it takes up permanent residence in the substrate of the unconscious, where it waits. It is waiting right now. While the rest of you built a career, learned to drive, fell in love, got your heart broken, healed, or told yourself you healed, that fragment never moved. It remained exactly where you left it, small, frightened, scanning every new face for the same ancient signature. Not for love. Understand this distinction because it will change everything you thought you knew about yourself. Not for love, for rescue. This is the first reframe, and I need you to let it land before we go further. You have not been failing to find love. You have been unconsciously casting a very specific role, over and over, in a play that never ends because the inner orphan does not want a partner. It wants a savior. And nothing, no stable, emotionally available, securely attached person can ever satisfy that particular hunger because the hunger was never designed to be fed by an equal. It was designed in the desperate architecture of a child's nervous system to be fed by a rescuer who arrives just in time, who chooses you above all others, who fills the silence where a parent's attention should have been. And here is where the story turns dark, because this is precisely the frequency a narcissist is built to transmit on, not by accident, not by coincidence, by resonance. Think of your psyche as a tuning fork struck once long ago in childhood and left vibrating at a very particular pitch ever since. Most people who walk past you will never hear that pitch. They are tuned to different frequencies entirely, frequencies of mutual respect, of slow-building trust, of ordinary, unremarkable safety. And because your inner orphan is not listening for safety, it does not resonate with them. They register unconsciously as flat, boring. Something is missing, you'll say, unable to explain what. But then someone else walks into the room, and this one sees you, really sees you, or performs seeing you with such precision it is indistinguishable from the real thing, at least in these first dazzling weeks. This one asks questions no one has asked before, listens with an intensity that feels like being pulled out of deep water and finally allowed to breathe. This one mirrors your wounds back to you with uncanny accuracy, not because they share them, but because they have spent a lifetime studying exactly what wounded people need to hear, the way a locksmith studies the architecture of locks. This is love bombing. You already know the term. You've read the articles, watched the videos, nodded along, thought, yes, I understand this now, I'll never fall for it again. But knowing the mechanism intellectually and feeling its pull, are two entirely different nervous systems responding. Because when it happens to you, it will not feel like manipulation. It will feel like homecoming. Say that word slowly. Homecoming. Because that is precisely what the inner orphan experiences in those first intoxicating weeks with someone who loved bombs, not romance. Reunion. The frozen fragment of you, still 5 years old, still 8 years old, still standing at the edge of some long ego room waiting to be chosen, finally hears footsteps approaching. Finally sees a hand extended. Finally, feels the unbearable weight of that old vigilance begin, just slightly, to lift. Your rational adult mind might notice something is moving too fast. It might whisper, slow down, you barely know this person. But that voice is coming from the wrong room. It is coming from the part of you that lives in ordinary time, in ordinary adult judgment. The inner orphan does not live in ordinary time. It lives in an eternal present tense of unmet need, and when that need appears to be met even by an illusion, even by a performance, it will override every rational signal you possess. Because for that fragment, this is not a new relationship. This is the reunion it has been waiting for since before you can remember. And this is the terrible, elegant cruelty of the predator-protector paradox. The narcissist does not create your vulnerability. They locate it. They are drawn, with a precision that can feel almost supernatural, to exactly the wound that will make you most receptive to exactly the performance they are best at giving. Two unconscious systems, magnetized toward each other across a crowded room, one starving for rescue, the other starving for control, each one mistaking the other's hunger for the exact medicine they require. I want you to notice something happening in your body right now. Maybe a name has surfaced, maybe a face, maybe the memory of a particular room, a particular night, a particular sentence someone said to you that felt, at the time, like the first true thing anyone had ever said. Do not push it away. Do not rush to analyze it yet. Just let it sit there in the space we've opened together, because this is where the real work begins, not in understanding them, but in finally turning around to face the small, frozen figure who has been running this search on your behalf your entire life. We are going to meet her, or him. We are going to walk together into the room where that fragment still waits, and we are going to do something no one has ever done for that part of you before. We are going to stay. We are going to stay. Close your eyes for a moment, if you can do so safely while still hearing my voice. If you're driving, if you're walking, simply let your gaze soften instead. Let the edges of the room blur, because what we are about to do lives beneath the visual field anyway. This is the technique Jung called active imagination, and unlike ordinary daydreaming, it is not an escape from reality. It is a descent into a deeper, more honest reality than the one you transact in every day. The reality of the psyche, where images speak a language older than words, and where the fragments you have spent a lifetime avoiding are finally willing to be met. Picture a door, not a metaphorical door in some abstract sense. See it, feel the temperature of the air around it. Notice its color, its texture, whether it is old wood or something colder, something more clinical. This is the door to the room where your inner orphan has been waiting. And I want you to notice, without judgment, without rushing to change it, exactly how you feel standing in front of that door. Some of you will feel a pull, an eagerness, almost a relief, as though you've been waiting years for permission to open it. Others will feel a heaviness in the limbs, a reluctance so old it feels like bedrock. Both responses are correct. Both responses are simply information about how your psyche has learned to survive. Now reach for the handle. As you do, understand what you are actually doing in this moment, because the mechanism matters as much as the imagery. When you consciously, deliberately turn toward the fragment you have spent a lifetime unconsciously trying to heal through other people, you interrupt a pattern that has run on autopilot since before you had the language to question it. You are, in this very moment, doing something your nervous system has never done before. You are choosing to be the one who enters the room instead of waiting endlessly for someone else to walk through it and rescue you from it. Open the door, see the room. Notice its size, its light, whether it feels like a bedroom from your childhood, a hallway, someplace that exists nowhere in literal memory but feels unmistakably familiar anyway, the way certain dreams do. And somewhere in that room, notice the figure, the child, the frozen fragment. You will know them by a particular feeling more than by any clear visual, a tightness, a smallness, an old and terrible patience, the patience of someone who has been taught that wanting things too visibly gets you nothing, or worse. This is the moment most people flinch away from, in life and in this exercise. Because meeting that fragment means admitting how long it has been waiting. It means feeling in full the years of silent vigilance, the countless rooms scanned for a rescuer who was never coming, the countless times an adult version of you walked toward exactly the wrong person because that frozen child recognized something in them. Not safety, but familiarity, which the unconscious mind, in its terrible innocence, often mistakes for the same thing. I want you to say something to that figure now. Not out loud unless you're alone and it feels right. Say it inward, toward that small, waiting shape in the room of your own psyche. I see you. Just that. Nothing more elaborate is required because elaboration is often the ego's way of avoiding the simplicity of real contact. I see you. I know why you have been searching. I know what you have been hoping every new face might finally deliver. And I am not here to punish you for it, and I am not here to abandon you the way everyone else did. I am here to stay. This is the pivot point, the place where the entire architecture of the cycle can begin, slowly, to reorganize itself. Because the tragedy of the inner orphan was never that it wanted rescue. Wanting to be met, wanting to be chosen, wanting safety, these are not flaws. These are the most human hungers there are. The tragedy is that it has been searching for a parent in the bodies of adults, in the faces of romantic partners, in relationships that were never built to hold that particular weight. No lover, however devoted, however securely attached, can retroactively parent the child you once were. That work belongs to exactly one person, and it is the person standing in that room right now, doorway open, finally willing to look instead of look away. This is why the narcissist's love bombing felt like homecoming, and it's important now to say the harder, quieter truth underneath that insight. The homecoming your psyche was searching for was never actually about them. It was never really about any partner, past or future. The home you have been unconsciously trying to return to your entire adult life is not a person. It is a relationship with yourself that was interrupted before it could properly begin. Every narcissist, every emotionally unavailable partner, every painful echo of the same pattern was never truly the destination. They were a detour, a desperate substitution, the psyche's best available strategy for solving a problem that substitution can never actually solve. Feel the difference between those two sentences, because your nervous system will register them very differently. I need someone to save me is a sentence spoken from the frozen room, from the child who has no other resources, no other language. I am learning to be the one who stays is a sentence spoken from an entirely different place, a place with agency, a place with authority over its own inner world. This is not positive thinking. This is not a slogan you paste onto a wound and call it healed. This is the slow, unglamorous, often uncomfortable work of psychological integration, which Jung understood was the entire purpose of a human life, not the elimination of the shadow. Not the banishing of the inner orphan, but the conscious, deliberate act of bringing it home into relationship with the rest of who you are. Because here is what almost no one tells you about that frozen fragment. It is not your enemy. It has never been your enemy. It has been trying, in the only way available to a wounded child, to keep you safe, to keep you seeking connection, to keep the hope alive that someone, somewhere, would finally turn around and truly see you. Its methods have been catastrophic. Its intentions have never been anything other than love, however distorted, however desperate. And this is precisely why punishing yourself for the pattern, calling yourself broken, calling yourself a magnet for narcissists, calling yourself somehow defective, only deepens the very split you are trying to heal. You cannot shame a wounded child into wholeness. You can only sit beside it, patiently, again and again, until it begins to trust that this time someone is actually staying. Open your eyes now, gently, and let the room around you come back into focus. Notice you are still here. Notice nothing catastrophic happened in that inward journey. Only contact, only recognition, the first thread of a much longer conversation you will continue having with yourself. Likely for the rest of your life, because integration is not an event. It is a practice. In the days ahead you will feel the old pull again. You will meet someone whose attention feels like electricity, whose interest feels like being chosen out of a crowded, indifferent world, and something in your chest will whisper, "This is it. This is finally it." When that moment comes, I want you to remember this room. I want you to remember the door. I want you to pause, even for 3 seconds, and ask the question that changes everything. Is this resonance, or is this recognition? Is this a genuine mutual meeting between two whole people, or is this my inner orphan once again, mistaking the shape of an old wound for the shape of home? You will not always get the answer right away. That is not the goal. The goal is simply the pause, the sliver of conscious space between the old automatic reaching and the new hard-won choice. In that pause lives your entire future, every relationship you have not yet had, every version of yourself not yet lived into. The cycle was never a curse placed on you by fate, and it was never proof that you were unlovable, or broken, or destined to keep choosing the wrong people forever. It was a frozen child standing in a room inside you, doing the only thing it knew how to do, for far longer than anyone should have to do it alone. Today, you walk through that door. That is how the cycle actually ends. Not in a single dramatic breakthrough, but in this quiet, repeated act of turning inward instead of outward again and again, until the search finally stops, because the one you were looking for was learning, all along, to become